Hi friends, in this video, let's compare Vista's store part functionality to Onyx's typical recording functionality. In the last video, we showed you how to load everything from the output and then record that into a queue. And then showed you how to set the options to make it work the way Vista works with Store All. Store Part, as they note in the Vista tutorial, is pretty much the way Onyx works in terms of building queues just by default. Say we take some lights here, okay, and we're going to go change some color, point them somewhere, get them all ready to go, right? All nice and ready on our stage. Storing part is, there's a variety of things you can do and a variety of things that Vista can do and Onyx can do the same to take individual pieces out of the queue and store some things and not others, etc. So the first thing is, if I just go and pull up my command keypad, let me bring it back over, apologies for that, and hit record, and go to put that in a queue, with the default settings, it's going to store everything I've brought into my programmer, so not things from queues, but anything that I've worked with or touched since I last cleared my programmer fully by pressing clear twice, okay? And it's going to record those items into a new queue. Now, if I put it on a blank spot here on my playbacks, on the main playbacks here at the bottom of the screen, it's going to record it as the first queue. If I put it on top of another queue, it's going to add a new queue at the end of that queue list. But there are some good options in here that are really helpful to be aware of. Filtering here allows you to record only certain parameters. So even though I've put pan and tilt into the programmer and worked with them, if I turn on the filtering and start to engage these buttons and I don't turn on pan tilt, it's not going to be stored. So that's key. You can filter things out if you want to. Personally, I don't use it a ton, but it's one of those things that can be helpful in certain situations. And if you're newer to programming, it's a good way to be sure you're only programming the things you want to and not other attributes of your lights. We have other filters as well in here, such as whether we're doing just base values, effects, only parts of the effects such as swing, time parameters such as fade and delay, whether we're recording all of the fixtures that are in the program or just the ones that are selected or just the ones that aren't. You get both options there if you desire. Source active and inactive is really key, and let's do a quick demonstration to walk you through this. So when we do record a queue in Onyx, we'll just call it queue list 5. What happens to the things in your programmer? They get grayed out all of a sudden. And then if I grab a single light here, and I just work with just that light. So maybe I move it here in my 3D visualizer and I turn it on at full. Perfect. Now we see in the programmer that this fixture selected in this particular parameter, its intensity at full is in bold, whereas the rest are kind of grayed out, okay, as well as the pan and tilt. What's the difference? This is the active versus inactive. So when Onyx records a queue, all of the attributes in it become inactive. Okay, so the programmer isn't cleared. The attributes are still there, but they're deactivated. Why? Well, Onyx is a tracking console, and just like Store Part in Vista, which uses tracking, if I were just to go ahead, record, and add a second queue to the same queue list, I don't need to re-record everything that was in Q1 already. Why? Because it's going to track forward automatically. And in fact, if I did re-record those things and then I changed something in Q1 rather, that would not track forward to Q2 because I recorded the parameters in both of those queues. Okay, so that's what active and inactive does. It keeps the items in the programmer so you can still work with them, still modify them, etc. But assuming you're going on top of an existing queue, there's no need to actually record it in that queue. So if I just press record and press this queue, then it's only going to store the active items because everything else is going to track through. Where this can get you into trouble is if, like this, I just recorded a queue here and I didn't clear my programmer, but I changed just this one light and now I record it to a new queue list, right? If I do that, and then I clear out fully, and I play only that new cue list 6, we can see the light fade in and move, but not change color, not do the rest of the things that had been stored in this cue list. Okay, so the basic rule of thumb is that active and inactive can feel a little bit confusing to people, and I totally understand that. It doesn't have to be, though. The biggest rule of thumb with it is simply to clear your programmer twice if you're moving to a new cue list. If you're working off the same cue list that you already had before, then that's totally fine. Just go ahead and continue working through that cue list. And if you, in terms of tracking, if you hit clear twice and you are within a cue list, like I was in this cue list here, you notice that, well, if I clear the program, or clear the queue rather, everything's going to go away. But those items from Q1 will still track through. So if I'm going to record a second queue, I'll just play this queue and then go to my programmer, adjust whatever I need to adjust, and then build the queues on, knowing that only the new stuff's going to get stored. Everything else is going to track through. Okay, so it's really not too complicated. It's a little bit different way of thinking through things, but it really is as simple as just like when you have multiple faders playing in most lighting consoles, including Onyx, and I believe including Vista. Basically, things continue. Lights continue doing what they're doing until they're overridden or stopped. Okay, and just advancing to the next queue isn't going to stop them automatically. They're going to keep going, and that's generally what we want them to do. In terms of tracking, we can also, as we've talked about in previous, again, use fade and delay to delay certain attributes of lights, entire lights themselves, or the whole queue. Those can be recorded into queues as split fade times, as delays, all kinds of things you can do there, so that you can make things happen at different times within the queue. You can hit play once and some things fade in instantly, some other things come in just a little bit later, some other things come in even later, all with delay times, different fade times, etc. This can be really helpful if you want to make a transition in color or something else first and then have intensity fade up later. You could set a delay for just as long or as long as the initial fade was, which in Onyx is 2.5 seconds by default. Other than that, it's pretty simple. I think we covered all the basics. There are a couple others from this tab to be aware of. So queue only is one that's in Vista and it's in Onyx too. When you store something as queue only in the middle of a longer queue list, typically, that basically is a really good way to insert a queue that's very different between two other queues that are very similar. How does this work? Well, say for example, let's just do a good example. So we're in this queue and maybe we go and we load and we record that as a second queue. Okay. So now we have our first queue and our second queue, and they're essentially the same or really, really similar. Okay. Now, what if we want to go right in the middle of that and, turn everything off, change where they're at, change their color, and turn them to 50%. Totally different, changes a lot of things where those things were tracking through from the first queue to the second queue, and if we go ahead and just insert this queue, we're actually going to mess up the second queue, okay, because this queue will now track forward. Okay, for situations like these where you're going back later, adding something in, then queue only can make a lot of sense. We can record this, turn on queue only, type queue 1.5, so we just have to type in 1.5. Then we can either click on this button or it's already selected. It has this white border around it and it's at the top of our screen, so we can hit enter. Now, we go from 1 to 1.5 to 2. Back to 1, where apparently we didn't have intensity, to 1.5 to 2. And so we see that where we recorded that queue 1.5, all we stored in there, we only stored to that queue, and we made sure that tracking from previous showed up beyond it. Onyx took care of writing that all in to make sure it would work for you. Okay, now it's not going to track from the first queue to the third queue in the future if you make changes, but it leaves them alone for now, and you're good to go. Other than that, that's pretty much it. In our next video, we'll talk about the editor, how to work with things, and kind of follow up with the last video of the Vista training series, hitting all the basics you're used to in Vista, covering them in Onyx. Again, if you've loved these videos, then be sure, if you need Onyx gear, buy it from us at Learn Stage Lighting Gear. That helps us grow and helps us do the things we do. And also, if you're looking to deep dive into Onyx or asking for personalized help, we do that every single day inside of Learn Stage Lighting Labs. We've got courses and we've got personalized help in our community from lighting experts, including myself and others. And we would love to have you as a member. So check that out as well. It's not expensive and it can save you a ton of time and frustration. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.